can you explain what is causality in 3 levels of difficulty? Of course, this is inspired by the Wired's 5 levels of difficulty, if you have seen it. So the levels are grandma. Of course, I don't mean to say that, grandmas know about causality, but here I'm just assuming here's a grandma who doesn't know about, economics or causality. And the second level is a college fresher who is just getting started with causal inference classes. And the third is, of course, a causal expert. So how would you go about explaining, what is causality to these 3 people?
Okay, I'll try. I think it's going to be harder for me, the most complex level. But for grandma, I would say something like, so I have 2 kids, right? So let's say that I have 2 kids, Francisco and Nina. And let's say that you spend time with me and you notice that Francisco is always on timeout. It's always on timeout. Every time I put him on timeout, and Nina, I don't put Nina on timeout. She is very kind. She's always like free to do whatever she wants. But Francisco, I always add a lot of restriction to him. I am usually very harsh on him. And you might see this and say, and you also notice at this time that Francisco tends to be very defiant and doing a lot of doing a mess all the time and not being very compliant. And you might say, hey, look, your timeout is not working. Your timeout probably it's making things worse because look, you don't apply timeouts to Nina, but you apply timeouts to Francisco. And just by looking at them, I can see that Nina is very kind, is very gentle, she's very compliant, and Francisco is always on timeout. And I can really see that Francisco is struggling a lot. He's very defiant, he's doing a mess all the time. And I can see that you put him on timeout, and this clearly is not working because he's like he's full of energy, he's playing all the time and making a mess. So timeout in this case is clearly not working. It's making Francisco defiant, it's making him mad. It probably shouldn't do timeout. So this is someone looking externally and seeing those 2 things co-occurring. The timeout is co-occurring. It's occurring at the same time as a bad behavior. And you might conclude from that, okay, the timeout is actually causing the bad behavior. But you might not have considered the other way around, which is that because Francisco is very defiant, he tends to go to timeout more than Nina. Nina is not defiant at all, so she doesn't go to timeout. So you can see 2 things co-occurring, but if you don't know how the timeout was decided, then you cannot really tell which one causes which. You cannot tell if it's the timeout that is causing the bad behavior, or if it's the bad behavior that is causing the timeout, because you don't know how the timeout was decided. So causality really tries to untangle this thing. Like I have 2 events co-occurring. I will need to know which one causes which, or if it's something else that might be causing both of them. And I really need to understand how can I untangle this. So in this situation, what you can do is you can actually look at very smart people in the university that they can do something like study behavior on kids, and they can do something like a bunch of kids, like 100 kids, 1,000 kids, and they can recruit parents and say, hey, for half of the people randomly, if you see a bad behavior, you're going to apply timeout. For the other half chosen randomly, you're not going to apply timeout. You're just going to sit with them and you're going to ask them to stop. And you can try this 2 stuff. You can try the timeout. And just talking to them. And after a while, you can call back those people and ask them, okay, so did the bad behavior improved? And then you can actually see, okay, in the group that was assigned the timeout, the group that was assigned timeout, you may say, okay, so the timeout group really had the bad behavior decreased much more than the group of people that had just the conversation, just sitting and talking with the kid. You can see now it's a bunch of people. You randomized, you gave randomly, some people you assigned a timeout, some other people you assigned just sitting and talking. And by that, you can conclude that, okay, if the group of people that got the timeout really decreased the amount of bad behavior, now you can claim, okay, I'm pretty almost certainly that the timeout is causing a decrease in bad behavior, and the fact that when you looked at isolated at my family and you saw bad behavior and timeout co-occurring, it's not that the timeout is causing the bad behavior, it's just probably that I apply more timeouts to the kid that is more defiant. So that's how I think that's the upper level of how I would explain causality. It's a long story, but to make it simpler, I think
Yeah,
it
that
has to
was
be
an
long.
excellent example. Yeah, I think it definitely ticks the box of, explaining to grandma, and of course it ticks the box to, explaining it to a college fresher. Uh, I think if you had to add more nuance to, let's say, a causal expert, would you add, something like a counterfactual here?
Yeah, I think for an expert, I think what we would think of is that causality is basically thinking in terms of parallel worlds and thinking what would happen if I did this instead of that. So that's how we conceptualize. So we can talk about the same example, right? So we have let's say that in causal inference we have this term which is a treatment, that's some decision, some intervention that we make. So in this case the treatment is timeouts. Let's say that I'm trying to understand the effect of timeout on bad behavior. I have to properly define what bad behavior is. So let's say it's uh, not complying, shouting, something like that. So I properly define bad behavior, and then I apply. My question becomes how bad behavior is going to turn out to be under the presence of timeout versus no timeout for the same individual. So this is a causal question. Like I have a same individual, and I want to understand what will happen to this individual under an intervention and under no intervention. And of course I cannot know this for a same individual because I don't have parallel words. I can only see what happened under one intervention. So in practice what we tend to do is, okay, I have a bunch of individuals that are on average the same. They have to be on average the same, and I see a bunch of them have applied a treatment and the other don't have the treatment. So if they are on average the same, the only thing that differs between them is the treatment that they get assigned to. Then all the difference that arised from that point onwards can be attributed to the treatment. So because they are on average the same, I apply treatment to part of them, and they are the same. This is very important. They have to be roughly the same, on average the same. If that's the case, I can conclude that whatever difference I observe from that point onward is only due to the treatment, because that's the only fundamental difference between them.